You open the fridge for a midnight snack, bathed in its artificial light, feeling a sudden wave of guilt wash over you. You have been told your entire life to eat 3 square meals a day. Never graze, never snack, just strictly follow the schedule. But your body was actually designed by 300,000 years of doing exactly that. Before the invention of the clock, schedules meant nothing. The concept of lunch or dinner is a complete modern illusion. Out in the wild, your ancestors ate a little bit whenever food appeared. Modern society is entirely obsessed with food schedules. We eat when the clock strikes noon, regardless of whether our bodies are actually hungry. But take away the wristwatch, the office hours, and the brightly lit supermarket. Drop yourself back into the harsh reality of the Pleistocene epoch. Out there on the wild savanna, food was never guaranteed. There was no pantry to store leftovers, and no refrigerator to keep meat fresh. If you found a patch of ripe berries, you didn't carefully pack them for later. You ate them right there, right at that moment. This constant, low-intensity grazing was the original human diet. Anthropologists often refer to this natural behavior. For 99% of our history, humans were walking scavengers and gatherers. You moved across the landscape, picking up small calories all day. A handful of wild nuts here, a bitter tuber pulled from the dirt there. Your brain was wired to constantly scan the environment. When you finally spotted something edible, your strongest instinct was to consume it immediately. Leaving calories behind meant someone else would surely take them. This is exactly why modern grazing feels so incredibly natural to you. When you walk past a bowl of candy, you instinctively grab one. Your ancient brain is simply doing its job. It sees easily accessible calories and screams at you to secure them right now. But there is a massive difference between the ancient savanna and a modern office. Finding food in the past required walking for miles. In the office, it only requires reaching out your arm. The deep survival instinct hasn't changed at all, but your environment has completely transformed. To see what this really looks like in practice, we have to look closely at modern hunter-gatherer tribes living today. Anthropologist Alyssa Crittenden spent years studying the Hadza people of Tanzania. She observed something truly fascinating about their young children. Hadza children do not sit at a dining table waiting for 3 scheduled meals. By the time they are 5, they are already foraging. They walk through the thick bush, plucking baobab fruit and wild berries. They essentially snack continuously throughout the entire daylight hours. In fact, these young kids gather up to half of their own daily calories. There is no official breakfast, lunch, or family dinner. There is only the endless cycle of finding food and eating it immediately. This continuous snacking isn't considered a bad habit out there. It is a highly efficient and necessary survival mechanism. Small bodies desperately need constant energy to fuel their rapidly growing human brains. And constant grazing provides a steady, reliable stream of glucose. Your own childhood cravings for snacks are deeply rooted in this prehistoric past. But surely this constant eating leads to massive weight gain, right? You might think so, but not when you live in the wild. Researcher Herman Poncer carefully measured the daily energy expenditure of the Hadza tribe. What his team found completely shocked the scientific community. Hunter-gatherers don't actually burn significantly more calories than modern office workers. Their daily metabolic rate is surprisingly similar to yours. So why aren't these ancient foragers overweight if they burn the same energy? It comes down to the specific type of food available. Wild food is incredibly fibrous, tough to chew, and extremely low in calories. You can eat wild berries all day and barely survive. But modern snacks are carefully engineered in labs to be explosive calorie bombs. One chocolate bar contains the energy of a whole fruit bush. Your body is perfectly designed to graze on low-calorie, high-fiber foods. It expects a slow and steady release of natural energy. When you apply that ancient grazing instinct to modern junk food, the biological system completely breaks down. You are overloading the engine. You are essentially fueling a savanna hunter with high-octane rocket fuel, and your body responds by storing all that excess energy as fat. For hundreds of thousands of years, fat was the ultimate biological savings account. It was the only thing keeping you alive during winter. So when did we stop grazing freely and start eating 3 strict, scheduled meals? The answer lies in the biggest mistake in human history. Around 12,000 years ago, humans invented agriculture. We traded our nomadic freedom for fields of wheat, barley, and domesticated cattle. Farming completely destroyed the opportunistic snacking lifestyle. You couldn't just wander and eat anymore. You had to work the fields all day. Food became something that was harvested in massive batches, stored in granaries, and tightly controlled. Eating became a When the Industrial Revolution hit, the schedule became even more rigid. Factory bosses needed workers to take breaks at exactly the same time. The concept of a designated lunch hour was born out of industrial efficiency, not human biology. Your stomach was trained to follow the factory whistle. Before this, eating was a continuous, fluid relationship with nature. We didn't stop our lives to eat. Eating was simply part of living. But there was one specific exception to this constant daytime grazing. And it happens to be the reason we love dinner parties today. While daytime was for snacking and gathering, the evening was entirely different. When the sun went down, the tribe gathered around the fire. This was the time for the big shared meal. If the hunters brought back a large animal, it was cooked and distributed equally. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner found that nighttime fireside meals were about much more than calories. They were the foundation of human social bonding. During the day, conversations were focused on practical survival and work. But at night, sharing roasted meat, the tribe told stories and myths. This structured evening meal helped build the social brain. It created trust, established alliances, and ensured that the sick and elderly were fed. So your modern eating habits are actually a strange mix of two prehistoric behaviors. The urge to snack is your daytime gathering instinct, and the desire to sit down for a large family dinner is your ancient fireside sharing instinct. Both are deeply encoded in your DNA. The problem is that modern society has completely warped both of these instincts. We snack on highly processed sugars instead of wild fiber, and we often eat our large meals alone, staring blindly at a glowing screen, stripping away the crucial social bonding of the campfire. This profound evolutionary mismatch is why diets often fail so miserably. You are fighting against hundreds of thousands of years of survival programming. When you try to restrict yourself to 3 small meals and feel starving, you aren't weak. Your body just thinks there is a famine. It is incredibly stressful for an ancient body to be surrounded by food, but told not to eat it until the clock allows. The constant presence of food in modern life triggers a biological panic. Your brain screams to eat everything now before it miraculously disappears. But in a world of 24-hour grocery stores and instant delivery apps, the food never actually disappears. The feast never truly ends. Understanding this doesn't mean you should start eating candy all day long. But it does explain why resisting it feels like a monumental battle. You are not fighting a lack of willpower. You are fighting the very survival mechanisms that kept your ancestors alive through the Ice Age. The next time you feel guilty for wanting a mid-afternoon snack, take a moment to forgive yourself. It is not a modern failure. It is the ancient ghost of a savanna gatherer, just trying to make sure you survive the harsh winter that is never coming. To truly understand why your body holds on to this ancient ghost, you have to look inside your own mouth. Your taste buds are prehistoric survival tools. In the wild, sweet and fatty things are incredibly rare. When an ancient gatherer found something sweet, it was a biological jackpot. Anthropologists note that wild honey is the most prized food for the Hadza tribe. They will risk falling from massive trees just for a handful of it. When that natural sugar hits your tongue, your brain releases a massive flood of dopamine. It is nature's way of saying, eat this until it is gone. Because out on the savannah, there was no such thing as saving honey for tomorrow. If you didn't eat it, the ants or the baboons would. Now, take that exact same dopamine system and put it in the middle of a modern grocery store. The environment is entirely different. You are surrounded by highly engineered, calorie-dense foods that mimic the exact chemical profile of wild honey and rare fats. Your brain doesn't know what a factory is. It just sees an endless supply of high-value survival fuel and triggers the ancient grazing protocol. But the problem isn't just the sugar. It is the amount of effort required to digest it. Ancient food required serious mechanical work. Evolutionary biologist Richard Wrangham points out that wild tubers and raw meat demand hours of intense chewing just to break down the fibers. Snacking in the Stone Age was an active, calorie-burning workout. Your jaw muscles were literally earning the right to absorb those nutrients. Today, ultra-processed food is essentially pre-digested. It melts in your mouth, sending a massive shockwave of glucose straight into your bloodstream. This unnatural spike causes an inevitable crash, which makes your brain panic and demand another snack. And the cycle repeats. This is why you can eat a bag of chips and feel hungry an hour later. You are trapped in an evolutionary loophole. But if we step back and look at the broader picture of how prehistoric humans acquired their food, we uncover another massive misconception. When you picture ancient survival, you probably imagine a group of muscular men hunting down a woolly mammoth to save their starving tribe. We love the myth of the heroic hunter. It makes for a great story. But hunting with a wooden spear is incredibly dangerous and highly unpredictable. Most of the time, the hunters came back completely empty-handed. If the tribe relied solely on meat, they would have starved to death. The real backbone of prehistoric survival wasn't the heroic big-game hunt. It was the quiet, constant, opportunistic snacking of the gatherers. Anthropologist Richard lived with the Juhwansi tribe and meticulously tracked every single calorie they consumed. His data changed everything. He found that up to 8% of their entire diet came from gathered plant foods, like the highly nutritious mongongo nut. The gatherers, primarily women, provided a stable, completely reliable source of daily energy. They walked, Unlike a hunt, gathering didn't end in a dramatic kill. It was a peaceful, continuous flow of finding food and snacking on it. This lifestyle created a deep psychological sense of security. As anthropologist James Sussman notes, they didn't suffer from modern anxiety about the future because the land was their pantry. Food was everywhere, as long as you kept moving. You didn't need to hoard food, lock it up, or schedule times to eat it. The concept of an exclusive meal was unnecessary. So, how did we lose this freedom? How did humans go from continuous, stress-free grazing to rigid, scheduled, and highly controlled meals? The answer is the Neolithic Revolution. Around 12,000 years ago, humans made a choice that permanently altered our biology. We stopped moving and started farming. Jared Diamond famously called agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. When you look at the skeletal remains of the very first farmers, paleopathologists like Clark Spencer Larson found a shocking decline in health. Their teeth were full of cavities, their bones showed signs of malnutrition, and their average height dropped significantly compared to foragers. Why did their health collapse? Because they traded a highly diverse diet of wild grazing for a monotonous diet of cultivated grains. But farming changed something even deeper than our bones. It changed our relationship with time and scarcity. For the first time in history, food was harvested all at once and stored in a granary. It was no longer freely available on the bushes. This completely killed the opportunistic grazing instinct. You couldn't just eat whenever you wanted. You had to ration the supply to survive the winter. And because food was now stored in one location, it could be controlled, taxed, and stolen by elites or rival tribes. This is the exact moment human anxiety was truly born. The fear of the granary running empty replaced the trust in the wild savanna. Meals became highly structured, rigid events out of necessity. You ate your portion of grain in the morning, and you worked until the sun went down. But if agriculture created the concept of scheduled eating, the Industrial Revolution turned it into an absolute law. Fast forward to the factories of the 18th century. Factory owners had massive machines that needed to run continuously. They could not allow workers to graze or eat whenever they felt a natural biological cue. The human body had to be synchronized with the machine. So, they invented the factory whistle. The entire workforce was given exactly 30 minutes to consume their calories simultaneously. The lunch break wasn't designed for your health or digestion. It was designed to maximize industrial output and control your time. Even breakfast was reinvented. Cereals were heavily marketed during this era as a quick, easy way to get workers fed and out the door. We completely stopped listening to our internal hunger signals. We learned to obey the clock instead. Today, you sit at your desk at noon and eat a sandwich simply because it is lunchtime, regardless of whether your body actually needs fuel. And conversely, if you feel deeply hungry at 3 in the afternoon, society tells you that you lack discipline. You are labeled as a snacker, a word that has been twisted into something negative, a sign of poor self-control. Diet culture weaponizes this guilt, selling you programs designed to suppress your perfectly normal biological urges. But punishing yourself for wanting to eat between meals is like punishing yourself for breathing. The rule "don't graze" is a completely fabricated industrial law. It has absolutely no basis in human evolutionary history. Your body is a 300,000-year-old survival machine that expects food to be scarce, hard to find, and low in calories. It is totally confused by an environment where high-calorie fuel is always 10 steps away. So what happens when the endless daytime grazing crashes into the invention of the evening meal? Because while daytime eating was purely about calories, something entirely magical happened when the sun went down. If the hunters were actually successful, or if a large animal was scavenged, it wasn't eaten in the field. It was brought back to the camp, cooked over the fire, and shared with every single member of the tribe. This was the birth of the meal, not as a biological necessity, but as a profound social ritual. This nighttime feast is deeply embedded in your psychology. It is why we still place so much emotional importance on family dinners today. But modern life has fractured this too. We often eat our largest, heaviest meals alone, staring at glowing screens instead of the glowing fire. But perhaps the most damaging part of the modern eating schedule isn't the food itself. It is the deep psychological guilt. For decades, you have been repeatedly told that grazing is a moral failure, a sign that you simply lack willpower. You are taught to completely ignore the very biological signals that kept your lineage alive through the darkest winters of the Pleistocene. When you finally give in to a snack, your modern mind feels utterly defeated, but your ancient body feels completely victorious. Your brain thinks, "We did it! We secured the rare calories. We will survive another day on this harsh savanna." This is the ultimate evolutionary mismatch. Your physical hardware is perfectly tuned for a world that simply no longer exists. You cannot outsmart 300,000 years of genetic evolution with a 30-day diet app. So, how do you actually survive in a modern environment that constantly triggers your ancient grazing instinct? The first step is simple awareness. You must understand that the modern grocery store is essentially a trap for the prehistoric brain. Every brightly colored package is scientifically designed to hijack the dopamine system meant for discovering rare wild honey. When you feel the sudden urge to graze, recognize it for exactly what it is. It is not a lack of personal discipline. It is just the echo of a gatherer walking across the dry earth, constantly searching for the next handful of wild berries. You don't have to give up modern convenience, and you certainly don't need to return to foraging in the wild. But you do need to stop treating your own body like a broken machine that constantly needs to be punished into submission. Your body is not broken at all. It is an absolute masterpiece of survival, operating exactly as it was programmed to. It survived apex predators, it survived the brutal deep freeze of the Ice Age, and it survived the harsh physical toll of agriculture. And it did all of that by taking every single opportunity to eat when food was generously available. The rigid concept of 3 square meals a day is nothing but a temporary blip on the massive radar of human history. It is an artificial industrial rule forced upon an ancient, profoundly wild organism. Once you finally accept this truth, the deep shame begins to fade away. The intense pressure of the ticking clock loses its power. You can begin to completely separate your natural biological hunger from the artificial schedule of the modern workday. You can learn to respect the evening gathering for its incredible social warmth, rather than just its calorie count. And you can look at your own daily habits with a sense of anthropological wonder, rather than constant frustration. Because beneath your modern clothes, beneath your job title, you are still that highly efficient ancient survivor. Every single living cell in your body is a silent testament to the absolute fact that continuous, opportunistic foraging worked. It kept us alive when the world was entirely unforgiving, completely unpredictable, and brutally empty. So, the next time you find yourself awake in the quiet, lonely hours of the night, and you open the fridge for a midnight snack, bathed in its cold, artificial light. Dalmar. Do not let a sudden wave of guilt wash over you. You are not failing a diet. You are just an ancient human, successfully doing exactly what you were born to do.